Elizabeth Holmes documentary proves lean-in feminism is toxic. Rolling Stone. Get the magazine. Subscribe to the all-new Rolling Stone. Everything you need to order today and save over 66%. Newsletter sign up. Sign up for our newsletter and go inside the world of music, culture, and entertainment. The Theranos founders' specific brand of corporate feminism sets an example for us all. In recent years, the corporate world has given rise to a new figure, the lady boss. The lady boss is, perhaps above all else, the lady boss is resistant to being called out on her behavior. Whatever form the ascent of the lady boss stems from the popularization of what has been referred to as lean-in, inspired by Facebook Sheryl Sandberg's. When it was first, since lean-in feminism entered the popular zeitgeist, it has given rise to a cottage industry of rah-rah girl power messaging, all of which promotes the message that women can do and be and achieve anything, provided the system is already stacked in your favor. To begin with, women who work, Rachel Hollis, wildly expensive, and brands without maternity leave policies tweeting about International Women's Day. It has also given rise to the idea that women in power are unimpeachable and immune to feminist critique, simply by virtue of the fact that they have achieved such high positions, as evidenced by, or Sarah Sanders, that any feminist who did not support first female CIA Director Gina Haspel was a hypocrite. And more than arguably anything else, lean-in feminism also gave rise to. I am honestly perplexed by the idea that Holmes is some great unsolvable mystery or complicated character worthy of deep scrutiny. A young woman of Julia Carey Wong at Julia Carahoo. Holmes, the disgraced CEO and founder of the health startup Theranos, at the center of HBO's new documentary, has captured the public imagination for a few reasons: her disturbingly deep and allegedly fake baritone, her predilection for Issey Miyake black turtlenecks, her apparent compulsion to lie to people about minor details, up to and including they. Perhaps above all else, though, Holmes is a fascinating figure because she is so inscrutable, or, as the New Yorker put it, she is a vexingly sphinx-like figure. Since her career's it's not as if Holmes was the only young, white, highly educated person in the world who had figured out that all of these traits could grant her access to a world that would have otherwise been off-limits. As many have creeped. As one of the few female leaders in Silicon Valley, only 11% of all Silicon Valley executives are women, according to a 2014 poll. Gender worked to her advantage in terms of garnering media attention. As Alex Gibney, the director of the
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.